still present.
Well, I was going to start with the Old Testament and come into the future, the present. But the bottom line is, it starts in the Old Testament. Abraham had one wife, but Sarah couldn't have children, so she said, take Hagar and have a child who was Ishmael, who started the Muslim religion, basically. Forget about Muhammad.
He is father of the Arabs.
Yes, he was the head of the Arab countries. Go back also to where you said incest. Think of Sodom and Gomorrah and Lot. When Lot's wife died, and Lot and his two daughters were hiding in a cave. Now, don't forget, back then, a person's view of the world was very constricted. They thought it was the end of the world. And Lot's two daughters said that it's up to us to procreate the world. So we have to, in the words of the Bible, we have to lie with our father. So they got them drunk, and they both got pregnant and had children with their father. Well, that's incest. No matter how you slice it, that's incest.
But those were special circumstances. Those, if you're talking to somebody who's a theologian, they would tell you those are special circumstances in biblical history.
Right. They thought that they had to procreate the world.
To live by that today. Yeah.
And that's the thing. Even, here in the United States, up until, maybe 200 years ago, incest was not an uncommon thing. And it stopped because of the children were being born with all kinds of malformities, and I'm not saying that it's right. I totally disagree with it. But, as we continue to evolve as human beings, I think we're starting to understand the things that are right and the things that aren't right.
Go back to Genesis.
But also in terms of people, if people are allowed to expand the definition of what they want because of the nature of the human soul, people will engage these perversions, and they will come to the state and they will say, I want to be married to my pet. You will have examples of people who are siblings who want to marry one another, and because you have expanded the definition of marriage outside of what we know, what the Christian context of it was, what people knew of what it was in the past, the state will be bombarded by people who want to do these things now, and they will say that they have the right to do so.
Time out. It's ironic. It's ironic that you say that because, now don't laugh, but in Dear Abby, in the paper, somebody asked the question, whether it's true or not is immaterial, but the fact is that it got a serious answer. Two cousins wanted to get married. I think it was 2 second cousins or something. Now, the bloodline is there, but there is no law that says that two cousins can't marry. In fact, the old European view was that if a wife died and her husband is a widower, and the another relative's husband died and the wife is left a widow, it was to keep the bloodlines pure. Those two people married each other. That was very common in Europe.
I would.
And also, I want to say that you were talking about incest. Go back to the beginnings of Genesis. Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel. Abel dies.
Yeah.
Cain is marked with, God marks him and sends him to another land. There are people there. Obviously, if Adam and Eve were the first people, then somehow these people had to be related, and they married each other.
Well, what happened after in the first instances of creation, God allowed incestuous relations to happen because there were no other people around, and the earth had to be repopulated. And what happened after the flood is you had fallen angels that were on the earth. They were called the Watchers, and they referred to them now as being the beings who were the Nephilims. These were special beings on the earth that basically had relations with people who were humans on the earth, and they kind of made this other race that was on the earth, at the same time that you had people who were human beings on the earth. This super race had to eventually be wiped out. But if you're talking to somebody who's a theologian, they will tell you these are special circumstances in the scriptures. God does not expect these circumstances to be present among us today. And if we are going by the way we should live today, we have to be told what are the ethical standards for the Christian today based upon the proper interpretations of the text. And when it comes to sexuality, premarital sex is something that is not allowed among the Christian. People are to be married to engage in any type of sexual relations, and acts of homosexuality are not supposed to be allowed among people who are Bible-believing Christians. So when it comes to sexuality, this is what God expects. Also, if someone engages in any type of adultery, whether the person actually has sex outside the marriage, or even if they are a person who likes to look at like different types of X-rated material, and they want to lust after another person in their own mind. Christ says in the New Testament, even if you think about sex with another person outside of your marriage, that person has also been involved in the act of adultery.
Well, you don't even have to go that far back. President Jimmy Carter, in an interview with Playboy magazine, said that he has lusted in his heart. Okay, but I don't think you'd find a married couple more committed to each other than Rosalind and Jimmy Carter, just like Ronald and Nancy Reagan. Okay, I mean, they were religious people. The Reagans had the Hollywood lifestyle before he became president, but the bottom line is it's almost natural, I think, to have those feelings. It's human.
The only thing that can,
all right?
But the only thing that can break those feelings is conservative Christians would tell you, people who are evangelicals would tell you, the only thing that can break those feelings, you have to build your bond with Christ so strong that those lustful temptations, they don't come as often because of the fact that you are walking in the faith. And it says in the book of Revelation that only a few people will be saved, and narrow is the way if a person is trying to receive any type of righteousness in their life. Narrow is the way to go. People who are basically on the wide path and doing anything they want to do, those people are basically going the path of destruction. They're going the path to hell.
Personally,
like if they have, if they basically are people who are in a religion where everything is allowed, then that is not the true religion, because God states over and over again that He is a jealous God. He does not want you to put other gods before Him. He wants you to do what He asks you to do. He gives you a choice, and He sets down the ground rules. And if you, as a believer, don't want to follow those ground rules, then you can't be on the path to righteousness.
Well, as we have discussed on this very show in the past, God gives man free will. Okay?
Right, He gives you free will.
Right.
So do you believe that mankind, human nature, human intelligence has evolved to a point now where if people are allowed to choose another religion that allows them to marry same-sex, that it will not encourage others to try to fight for things like, as you referred to earlier, bestiality and things like that? I believe we as human beings have evolved to an intelligence level where we're not going to do stuff like that.
No, actually, I think that would happen because the nature of the human spirit is to explore, and is to do, and if humans are allowed to go based on their own wisdom, they will always engage in a type of situational ethics. If they think they have enough knowledge about different situations, they will justify anything. I mean, if it's incest, if it's murder, if it's suicide, if someone is engaged in situational ethics and they think they know enough, they can justify any act that someone can imagine. So, and that is just the nature of, I think that's just the nature of the human spirit to be that way. And so I think that if people are not given ground rules, if they are not given structure, people will do various things. And it's happened before. All you have to do is look at human history. That's what happened to the Roman Empire. Rome was not destroyed really by invaders from the outside. Rome was destroyed from within because the people became so decadent that they allowed people who were barbarians to take them over because they basically were just engaged in their own pleasure, and they got to the point where they weren't able to defend the nation.
See, and I think that we've evolved past that. I mean, if you read now, kids are being born now that by the age of 1 year old, they know how to use a computer. I believe our minds and evolution is taking over, and every generation is smarter than the last. And I see it with little kids, and you read about it in the paper, and younger and younger and younger children are reading. When I was growing up, you didn't read the newspaper unless you were a genius until you were 5 or 6 years old, and even then, you couldn't understand, comprehend, or read everything. You just knew your key words that you learned. And now these kids are 3 years old and they're reading. So I think we're getting more intelligent as we evolve.
Well, certain groups of people are becoming more intelligent. You basically have a lot of inequality when it comes to educational attainment in our society today, and a lot of it is based on income levels. People who have access to all of this, they are getting very good educations. They're getting the better jobs, the higher incomes. But you also have a lot of inequality. You have a lot of people who are in poverty who don't have access to these things. So you basically have a two-tier society that is developing. That all will continue to change as we evolve, as our intelligence level continues to evolve. And that's what I'm saying. I mean, you see these little kids. It doesn't matter where they're from, where they grew up, what their income level is. This little boy or little girl is 2 or 3 years old, and you hand them a cell phone, and they know exactly what to do with it. So I just think that as we continue to evolve, we're getting more and more intelligent, and I think that we have to add credibility to that fact. But also in terms of intelligence, it's not just the acquisition of knowledge; it's also the acquisition of wisdom.
Right.
You have a lot of kids who have a lot of knowledge about, the internet and computers and like different types of social media, but they don't have a lot of wisdom. Wisdom comes from the experience of knowing how to use the knowledge and knowing how to compare the knowledge. Also, if you're able to compare it